Over the next half hour, we talk with Ms. Hong about the book and her experiences.
Nansuk Hong, author of In the Shadow of the Moons. What's this book all about?
This is a story of my life since I was born in the church we call Unification Church. And I grew up, my parents were the members of the church, and I grew up in that church. I was married to Reverend Moon's eldest son when I was 15. And I lived with Reverend Moon's family for 14 years. And I left.
What is Unification Church? Why was it founded, and who founded it?
Reverend Moon is the founder, and he claims that he is the Messiah. He preaches that Jesus came as the Messiah, but he failed to fulfill his mission. And God sent Reverend Moon to follow up what Jesus originally had to do, to restore the humanity to God. That's basically what he's saying. And as members of the church, my parents and us did believe that Reverend Moon was the Messiah, and he's the one who is representing God, and we have to go out and witness and bring as many people as possible to the church.
Early in the book, you ask a number of questions. Among them, leaving the orbit of Reverend Moon would render me and my children spiritual outcasts, but would it put me in physical danger as well? If I fled, would the church track me down to silence me? But if I stayed, would I be any safer? How did you answer those questions?
How do I... If I leave the church, that means to the members of the church that we become Satan. That's what it means. The members see themselves as the chosen people by God, and once you leave the church, you go to the realm of Satan. And that sense, since me and my children left, we become the fallen people. And that's the main reason that still the church trying to get me and my children to come back. In terms of physical danger, there's aspect of battered woman situation, which I saw myself as one. My ex-husband was very abusive, and leaving the abusive situation is the time that's most, I think, dangerous to any battered woman. And also the church itself, I think it's a bit dangerous for them to acknowledge that Reverend Moon's first son's marriage was not fulfilled. The core essence of the church teaching is the blessing, which means the marriage. And Reverend Moon is the one who blesses people, and by getting blessed, you become the godly people. And Reverend Moon is the one who supposedly, he claims he's the perfect man, he's the Messiah. With his wife, he creates the true family. So his son and his children supposed to be this ideal family, ideal children, and they call themselves true children. And when his son's marriage basically breaks down, it doesn't really it's not a good picture for them to portray to people. And especially if I'm not silent, and if I'm outspoken, I'm sure the church sees that as a threat that's not that useful for them. And some of them might feel that it's better that I do not exist.
Put a couple of facts on the table. Reverend Moon was married how many times?
Legally, Well, I think legally twice.
How many children does he have?
That's, as far as I know, he has 15 children from two wives, but there are other people who also had his children. Some of them died.
What are the basic beliefs of the Unification Church?
The basic belief of the church is that we believe, the church believes Reverend Moon is the Messiah who came to the earth by God, spread God's words, and lead the humanity to God.
Does his family reflect those beliefs?
Can you explain the question again?
Well, you write in the book a lot about the beliefs of the church and how Reverend Moon's followers should abide by a certain code of standards.
Yes.
Did his family reflect that code?
I don't think so. What I saw in the family and the church is double standard between the family, and one standard of the family and another standard of the church members. The Reverend Moon's family do claim that they are the ideal family, and by portraying themselves as the perfect human beings, they expect people to give their reverence, their respect, and that's how they get certain power. Reverend Moon teaches that there should be no drug, no drinking, no cigarette, and you should be absolutely faithful to your wife or your husband. But what I saw in the family is complete opposite of what Reverend Moon teaches. I don't think they practice what they preach.
Your former husband was the oldest of the 15 children?
Yes, the elder ones. And elder son should be the one who is the heir and inherit the foundation of the church.
What is the book Divine Principle?
Divine Principle is a book that Reverend Moon claims that his revelation from God that explains some of the mysteries of the Bible. And the church members basically consider there is Bible that we church members do read and study about. At the same time, there's a Bible we consider as more than important. We give more importance to Divine Principle since it came from Reverend Moon.
You describe your former husband as a long-haired rock guitarist with a chip on his shoulder, and was not Reverend Moon's idea of a successor. You also say that both he and Mrs. Moon were absentee parents, promoting the church around the world and ignoring their own children at home. Can you elaborate?
Hyojin, my ex-husband, I think he was a rebellious son. He didn't want to follow his father's teachings, and he wanted to be a rock and roll star. And that was not acceptable to Reverend Moon. He wanted Hyojin to be the one who should follow Reverend Moon's path. And I think there was a conflict between Reverend Moon and his son. At the same time, Hyojin did want to inherit his father's power. He wanted to be the one in the position of Messiah's son. Many times he did say that his position is given by God, and even his father cannot take it away. He's the Messiah's son, and he should be the one who will inherit the foundation.
This is you, Hyojin, and your 4 children. When was this taken?
That was a long time ago, several years ago.
Where was it taken? Do you remember?
That was in New Yorker Hotel. We had a suite. The whole 30th floor is reserved for Reverend Moon's children and Reverend and Mrs. Moon. And that was taken on a church holiday. And we were all wearing church robe for the ceremony.
You lived in New York then?
Yes.
Did you ever go back to Korea?
Time to time for some of the church functions. not to visit my parents or my siblings, but there were some functions that I had to attend.
How did you get involved in the family? Why did you marry Reverend Moon's oldest son?
I was chosen. It wasn't my decision. I was 15. What I heard is that Reverend Moon and Mrs. Moon did consult a Buddhist lady who was supposed to be the one who is spiritual. We call it spiritual lady. And she, I think, saw my fortune and thought that my fortune would be good with Hyojin's. So I was chosen to be Hyojin's bride.
You also write on page 72, 73 that as the years went on, I came to believe that my youth, and you said you were 15 at the time, and my naivete were the central reasons for my selection. His ideal wife was a girl young and passive enough to submit while he molded her into the woman that he wanted. Time would prove that I was young, but not nearly passive enough.
Because I broke out of there, I suppose. Mrs. Moon also was married when she was 16, and Reverend Moon was 40. And I was 15, and I heard from Reverend Moon many times that he had to choose this 15 and 16 years old. And he said it was providential. That means it was given by God. But my inclination is that it was easy to influence if a wife or a daughter-in-law is young. And basically what I had to do, and also Mrs. Moon had to do, is to obey, to do what we were told to do. And I think she did that for the longest time. And I did that for 14 years. And just one day I decided that it wasn't going to be the case anymore. And I rebelled.
Did he abuse you physically?
Reverend Moon?
No, his son.
Yes. He was verbally abusive, at the same time physically abusive as well.
What kind of person was he? What did he do?
What did he do to me?
Did he have a job in the church? Did he have an occupation?
Initially, he basically had his nightlife, and he slept all day. And he had his band. He played guitar. He loved to sing, even though his father disapproved. Later on, he was appointed as a president of an organization that Reverend Moon founded. But his heart was on music. He wanted to be a rock and roll star. And basically he went to a studio where also Reverend Moon built, and he made his music. And that was his mission.
Again, going back to the early part of the book, you say that he beat me so severely that I thought he would kill the baby in my womb. He made me sweep up the spilled white powder, cocaine, from the bathroom floor, even as he continued to punch me. Later, he would offer a religious justification for beating me half senseless, a woman 7 months pregnant. He was teaching me to be humble in the presence of the Son of the Messiah.
Isn't it awful? The incident happened after he came back from his nightclub routine with his brother-in-law. And Hyojin and Jin-sung, his brother-in-law, were doing cocaine in our master bedroom. And against my better judgment, I did went and talk to him. I wanted to say that there are 4 children. I was pregnant with 5th one, and I said, you can't really do the, we can't have life like this anymore. You gotta take care of the kids, and you have to be more responsible. And I what I did was I took the cocaine that he had, and I went to the bathroom to flush it. And that's when he came after me and started punching me. And one fear I had was that he was going to harm the baby. He kept saying he was going to kill the baby. He was very upset at me, and I was afraid he was going to punch the baby that I was carrying. I was 7 months, and I was pretty big. And He kept punching me. There was a blood. He licked the blood, said it tastes good, and it was just horrible. He was very violent, volatile person to start with, and with his drinking problem and his cocaine addiction, it just became unbearable.
What were you thinking at the time?
Only thing I was thinking was that I have to save this baby, and so I kept quiet and hoped that he would stop, but he kept going on for a while. And his brother-in-law later on, well, him and Hyojin, they were laughing at the fact that Hyojin was punching me, and that was not a nice thing to experience.
Again, back to the book, 2 photographs, one with the family. Do you remember when this was taken?
The top one is when Reverend Moon came home from his prison, Danbury. He came to visit for a short time, and that's when we also had Youngjin's birthday, Reverend Moon's son.
Why was he in prison?
He was sent to prison for tax evasion and I think perjury as well.
And just below that, another photograph taken from what you describe as the East Garden.
Yes.
What is it?
This garden is the place where I lived, where Reverend Moon's family lived. And I was holding my daughter, first daughter, and I think I was 16, and that's a house where I lived.
At what point did you think that this marriage was a mistake?
Oh, from the very beginning, because the way the Hyojin behaved, my idea of whole ideal marriage was crumbling apart. But I felt that I had to be there since it was my mission by God, and I had to change Hyojin to a better person. And I was never happy with him personally, but it was all for God. And I think the religion is pretty strong enough to bear the unhappiness. So 14 years passed, and one day I was looking at him, and I felt that I think this marriage is done and I can get out.
You write, I was learning early in our marriage that hiding my feelings would be the key to self-preservation. I spent my days going through the routines of a seemingly carefree schoolgirl, and my evenings I was on my knees in desperate prayer.
The only strength that I got from very early was to pray to God, and that was the only thing I could do. And whenever I felt that I was down and depressed and unhappy, I would just pray. And sometimes it did make me feel better, but sometimes it didn't.
What's the state of the Unification Church today? How many members do they have worldwide, and where does their money come from?
Well, they claim they have millions of people, but I doubt that's the case. I think the church is shrinking, and members, I don't think they have new members, and the members already there are leaving as well. Money, the major source of the church is from Japan, Japanese church, and they send millions of dollars every month.
Who's they?
Japanese church. And
what is that? What is the Japanese church?
Well, the Unification Church in Japan, and they have a lot of businesses, and they have donations, and Reverend Moon gave Japanese leader, their mission is to bring money to Reverend Moon, and that's what they've been doing, and I think they were very successful.
You say toward the end of the book that when you stood before a New York judge and the divorce was finalized, he had told you that your marriage may be ended, but that doesn't diminish the role of being a parent to the 5 children that you and your former husband had. Is he a parent to those children?
He is. He has visitation with his children these days, and I think it's healthy for the children to have their relationship with dad. I do have problem with my ex-husband, but that's my problem, and I hope that children can have a good relationship with their dad, and I think that's vital to their upbringing.
You also write about some of the holdings that the Unification Church has, including the Washington Times. I want to come back to that, but what other holdings do they own?
Wow, you want the whole list? Oh, they have they have Washington Times, of course, and they have Atlantic Video. They have Universal Ballet. They have in New York. They have University of Bridgeport. They have there's a seminary in New York. They have New Hope Farm. There is a farm, another farm in Texas. They have big ship factory in Alabama. There's Gloucester, Alaska, in Hawaii. They have everything.
What do you think of the Washington Times as a newspaper?
I do not read the paper, so I can't really comment on that paper, except that Reverend Moon is the founder of that newspaper, and he claims that he is the one who should be credited to give a voice in Washington, D.C., in political realm.
Page 229, you say that although the editors claim that both publications, referring to the Washington Times and Inside Magazine, which is a weekly publication by the Washington Times Corporation, that both publications are independent of the Unification Church, but you say the first editor and publisher was James Whelan, who was fired after he objected to the church's interference. Interference on what?
Reverend Moon wanted his voice in Washington, D.C., and that's why he created the newspaper. And I think when there was opposition, he wanted to simply have another person who could convey what he wanted to say.
Has it made money?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think this money is just pouring into the newspaper every month. And that place is Reverend Moon's baby. That's what he calls it.
What was his operating style? What was his work habit?
Well, he gets up in the morning, he gets his massage, he has his breakfast, and that's from that point his work starts. The members, well, I have to say the leaders do come for the breakfast table, and that's where the report comes in, and Reverend Moon gives certain directions, and that's where the dining table is where the whole business is taken care of.
In your epilogue, you write that the evil at the heart of the Unification Church is the hypocrisy and the deceit of the Moons, a family that is all too human in its indescribable level of dysfunction. To continue to promote the myth that the Moons are spiritually superior to this idealistic young people who are drawn to the church is a shameful deceit.
I think they are hypocrite if they say they're ideal family, because that's not what I saw, and that's not what a lot of people didn't see. They have their problems. I think they are a very dysfunctional family, as well as a lot of other families out there. And for them to say they are the model people and people should give them the utmost respect is a lie. And I think that's evil. But the difficulty is the whole theology is based on Reverend Moon's claim that he is the Messiah and his children are sinless. So if he admits that's not the case, and they do have problems like everybody else, then the whole theory falls apart. So I think it's a bit difficult for them to admit that they're not the perfect people.
How did you flee the marriage?
When I realized that I had to leave, I went to see some of the lawyers, and I arranged in between my brother and my best friend, who helped me a lot. I arranged a storage room nearby. I rented a storage room nearby, and I basically was putting the stuff from my house to the storage so I could eventually leave. There were some pictures that, children's pictures that I wanted to take too. And eventually I planned for about 8 months. And one day I put the children in the van, I put the last suitcases, and I left. Went to Massachusetts, where I bought a house, small house, where we all are now, and we started our lives there.
Have you had any contact with Reverend Moon or his wife?
Not directly, but there are people who, church members, keep coming to my house, wanting to talk to me, and there are some family members who sent letters. And Mrs. Moon did send me a tape of her voice. She wanted, it was her message for me to come back, and saying that what I'm doing is evil, and I have to think about my children, and eventually I do have to come back.
The second or third to last page in the book, you say that there's an old Korean proverb, blame yourself, not the river, if you fall into the water. What do you mean by that?
My past basically is painful, and I wish that I had different life. And there are a lot of things that happened to me that I do not appreciate, especially some of the things that Reverend and his wife and Hyojin and his children did. However, it was also my choice to be there as well. It was my faith in God, and I stayed as long as I could. So I do not blame anybody for the pains that I have. I think there are certain responsibilities that I have to take in my life and the past, and that's life. And I have basically new life that I gave to myself. That's the greatest gift that I consider myself to have. And what I want to do is to reveal the certain things that I do know to people. And I felt a sense of obligation to the members who have no idea what these people are like. And they give their lives and they dedicate their lives to these people.
What's the reaction been to this book?
Well, there are some attacks from the church, and they basically attack my credibility. But there are a lot of people who have been sending letters to me saying that they do appreciate the fact that I did write this book, and they recognize certain things in the book that they felt, and it has been positive.
And finally, did you learn anything about yourself in writing this book?
A lot, actually. As soon as I left, I started writing this book, and it was also I had to reflect from very beginning what my life was and what my past was. And I think I saw it from different perspective than when I was there. And it was therapeutic to start from the beginning and retell the story.
Nansa Kong, who's the author of In the Shadow of the Moons, My Life in the Reverend Sun Myung Moon's Family, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
The orbit of Reverend Moon would render me and my children spiritual outcasts, but would it put me in physical danger as well? If I fled, would the church track me down to silence me? But if I stayed, would I be any safer? How did you answer those questions?
How do I? If I leave the church, that means to the members of the church that we become Satan. That's what it means. The members see themselves as the chosen people by God. And once you leave the Sun, when I was 15, and I lived with Reverend Moon's family for 14 years, and I left.
What is Unification Church? Why was it founded, and who founded it?
Reverend Moon is the founder, and he claims that he is the Messiah. He preaches that Jesus came as the Messiah, but he failed to fulfill his mission. And God sent Reverend Moon to follow up what Jesus leave the church. You go to the realm of Satan. And that sense, since me and my children left, we become the fallen people. And that's main reason that still the church trying to get me and my children to come back. In terms of physical danger, there's aspect of battered woman situation, which I saw myself as one. My ex-husband.
Over the next half hour, we talk with Ms. Hong about the book and her experiences.
Nansuk Hong, author of In the Shadow of the Moons. What's this book all about?
This is a story of my life since I was born in the church. We call it Unification Church. And I grew up, my parents were the members of the church, and I grew up in that church. I was married to Reverend Moon, else originally had to do to restore the humanity to God. That's basically what he's saying. And as members of the church, my parents and us did believe that Reverend Moon was the Messiah and he's the one who is representing God. And we have to go out and witness and bring as many people as possible to the church.
Early in the book, you ask a number of questions, among them, leaving the